Welcome to part 2 of our missile dodge game that we're building. If you remember where we left off last time, we had our little helicopter flying. We tap on the screen and he goes up and down, and of course our background moves around nicely. We got to add a couple new features to this game, because right now if I just let go, he just falls off the screen and nothing happens, and the background just keeps floating on by. And I'll never see my little helicopter again. Oh, unless of course I reset and run again. Yay, there he is. Alright. So the first thing that we need to add, we're going to add moving a missile. We're going to check if he crashed into the ground, and we're going to end the game, and then we're going to check if he got hit by a missile. So again, if you missed class, this is what we did, or if you're watching this video just for fun, get ready, this is going to be fun. Alright, the first thing we're going to do is add that missile. So we need a function, we call that move missile. But of course we actually need a missile. We don't even have a missile. So the first thing I'm going to do is go to my design, add a missile. Let's see, this was the image for my missile. Copy that, paste that in here, and look at that, high quality imagery right there. So there's my missile. It probably doesn't matter, but I am going to start him off the screen. Oops. I forgot, it doesn't like me to put in the -100. You can actually do it like this, but that would take a long time. So I'm not going to worry about it. There's my missile. He's going to come flying at my helicopter. In my code, I'm going to need a variable to track where the missile is. That'll be its X location. And I'm going to actually start him off the screen, so I'm going to set it at -100. And then to move the missile is pretty simple. It's much like we did with moving the helicopter or moving the ground. I can simply do missile plus equals, and then I can move it by a certain amount. But I'm realizing, as I'm saying this, that I'm probably going to want to be able to change the missile speed during gameplay. So I'm going to set it equal to, I don't know, we'll try 5. See how that works. So plus equals missile speed. And then of course we have to set position of our, oops, I forgot to change the title of it. Go back to my design. It's not image 2, it's missile. Oops, code. So yeah, set position of my missile. And I'll set it to the X of missile. And to its Y, I don't know what its Y is. Honestly, I think I'm going to change it, but I will do as it goes off the screen and comes back on. But for right now, I'll do get Y position of my missile. So basically, I am setting it, the picture of the image, the missile image, to its X location, which is constantly updating right here. And to a Y position, basically it's going to stay at the same Y every time it goes across the screen. Now, if I run, it works. My missile goes across the screen and never comes back. So the next thing I need is like a little if to check if it goes off screen. I should, it's always good habit to put in a few notations. So this is checking if off screen and resetting. So if missile is greater than 320, that means it's gone off the screen. Oops. Here we go. If it's greater than that, then we will set missile back to -100, so it's off the screen to the left. The other thing we probably want to do is change its position. So I'm going to do another set position of the missile. I'm going to set it to its X of missile, that variable. But now instead of setting it at the same y, I'm going to put it at a random number, somewhere between 0 and, let's see, we'll go down to about, let's go about I'll say about 270. I don't want it going too far. I don't want it like skimming the ground, but I do want it to come back. I think that'll work. Let's try run it a second. Yep. Is it changing? Yep, it is changing. The other thing that I might want to do is in here set missile speed to something random number. We'll say a random number between 3 and 8. So now if I run it, I'm just watching my missile. It changes Y value. Ooh, that's sped up and slows down and picks new random speeds. I like it. Cool. I'm pretty happy with my missile. Yep. And of course I can jump. But right now, that missile doesn't do anything. By the way, for those of you who think the missile should be coming from straight on, that's not like legit. It should be coming from behind because it's like somebody who's behind me chasing me is firing missiles at me. So there. Alright. I'm happy with that. Next, we'll check if we crash into the ground. Now, I did this perhaps maybe not the best way. I put a function here in my if statement. I could just do it. This could be pretty simple. Just check if my helicopter is too far to the ground and then do the end game. But I liked the idea of doing a function here that actually returns something. So what I talked about in class there is the function. So far all the functions we've done here, they don't actually require any parameters and they don't return anything to you. They just do some stuff. Now, much like a function you would see in math class, function x equals 3x plus 4, that function, if you give it an x of, say, f of 2, it returns a value. You plug that 2 in for that x, and you get whatever that is, 10. There's my arithmetic. So f of 2 returns the value 10. Well, similarly, we're going to create a function. This one isn't going to take any parameters like this, but it will return a value. It's going to, in this case, return true or false, whether I've crashed into the ground. So, function crashed into ground. Well, how will I know if I've crashed into the ground? Well, it'll be if this y of my little helicopter here is low enough. I'm going to try about 360, I think. So if heli, that's my y variable, is greater than, there we go, greater than 360, then I'm going to return. See, this is now I'm returning a value. This function is going to spit something back into the program here. So return true. That's not how you spell it. There we go. Else return false. Now, when you're writing a function that needs to return a value, it's important that it always does return something. And this one always will. It'll either return true or false. If I had left this else off, it might not be returning something, and that might cause a problem. The other thing that I got to do to check that this is working is an endgame function. So if I've crashed, I'm going to end my game. Now here's this, probably the simplest thing I could do is I will just set playing equals false. In fact, I'll start there. I could do things like stop the timed loop, but that would also stop moving my background, and I kind of would like my clouds to keep floating by even after I've crashed. So let's do this. Hey, that looks like that works. But I do want to add a couple other things in here. I want, one, when it crashes, I don't want them to just keep flying around like that. Two, I want to change this variable to 350. I want them to stop just a little higher up. Yeah, there we go. I want him to crash. I want him to burn. I got a little explosion GIF we'll put in there. I also want that ground to stop moving. So it looks like he got stuck. I like the clouds still moving, but I probably want the missile to disappear and the clouds to disappear. Alright, sorry, my brain stopped for a second there. So first I'll do hide element missile. Alright, second, I need to get this ground to stop moving. So I'm going to create a new global variable here called move ground and set it equal to true because I initially want the ground moving. And then if I get here, I'm going, when I get to end game, I'm going to do move ground equals false. Now, that does nothing by itself. I actually need something to stop happening, and what I really need to stop happening is for these ground variables to stop changing. So under my move background function, I'm going to have a if move ground. If that's true, put my curly braces around those things. If move ground is true, we'll be moving the ground. If that's false, those ground variables will stop changing. So now if I run it, I crash, notice my missile disappeared, the ground stopped, but the clouds keep floating by. Beautiful. A couple other things we wanted to add. One was an explosion. So I am going to come back to my design and put in an explosion. I'm going to actually use this fire GIF as its URL. I'm just going to put that in there. And I'm going to hide it because I don't want to show that burning all the time. Although there would be something cool about it burning all the time. I just thought about that. And you'd fall down and fall in a burning mess. Okay, sorry. So it's disappeared. Now, I'm also going to do something here just for simplicity's sake later on. I'm going to create a fire URL, which happens to be the string of the URL we just did. It's a really long URL, so I don't want to ever have to refer to it again. And I'm also going to do a explosion. I'll just call it exp URL. And that one I'm going to take this actual explosion where did it go? There it is, explosion URL. Copy that. Because what I'd really like to happen is when he crashes into the ground or gets hit by a missile, is for us to see this explosion like this. That looks cool. But if I just show that, it'll just keep repeating over and over again. Really what I want is just that one, and then for it to disappear and turn into that fiery mess. So when I crash, I'm first going to set my image URL of my, oops, why is it not pulling up my, there we go, of the ID there, of my missile, and I'm going to set it to initially the explosion exp URL. Beautiful. So now if I run that, oh, and I also need to set position of that of my explosion. I can't see the, no, not missile. Shoot, I didn't change the name of it. It's image 3. Crud. I should really go change that name. explosion. Here we go. All right, back to... By the way, this is the reality of programming. You go back and forth doing things as you realize you screwed something up and have to go back and change it or whatnot. I'm going to set the position of it to get X position of my helicopter, and I'm going to also set the position of my get Y position. Basically, I'm setting the position of the explosion to be right where my helicopter is, so it doesn't just happen somewhere in the middle of the screen here, but happens right where my helicopter is. Oh, I also would like to, now that I'm going to have that explosion, I probably want my helicopter to disappear, so I'm going to hide element heli. There we go. Alright, where are we at? Something didn't work quite right there. Set image URL, not of my missile. I want to set image URL of my explosion. Look at that. To the explosion URL. Let's try that again. Something didn't work. What did I do wrong? Move ground to set image URL to explosion URL. Set position of explosion to wherever my helicopter was, and hide my helicopter. I am going to pause my movie and figure out what I did wrong, and then come right back, and you'll never know. Alright, welcome back. I made a couple dumb little mistakes, and so I had paused it, and you didn't even notice, and we're back already. But we should fix those. So our first mistake was we were running this stupid thing, and sorry, I shouldn't call it a stupid thing. It's a wonderful, awesome game. We were running it though, and it was disappearing like everything was supposed to, but we weren't seeing our explosion. Well, that's because our explosion is hidden. We forgot to do show element explosion. So now if I run it, it does it, but the explosion is not in the right spot, which is because I put the wrong, under get Y position, I did get Y position of explosion, not of heli, for our helicopter. So I want to set the position of the explosion at the X and the Y of the helicopter. So now if I do it, oh, that looks beautiful, but it keeps doing this exploding thing over and over again and doesn't turn into our fire. So the last thing we want to do is set a timeout. It's a nice little function, which maybe I should have left that set time out. See what it does is it sets a timer and executes code when that number of milliseconds has elapsed. So perfect. We'll set a timer, and once it gets to a certain number of milliseconds, we'll change the URL of our explosion back to the fire one. So that'll work perfect. The parameters of the set timeout function, oh, it's not giving me my little cheat, there it is first a callback function. So we first have to actually put in a function, and then how many milliseconds. So rather than writing a separate function outside of our code, we're going to actually do it just right inside here. So we get this function, and in our function we're going to set image URL, and in this case we're going to set the explosion's URL back to the fire URL. Yeah, that's probably all we need to do in there. And then the second part of the set timeout is this number of milliseconds. So I actually put a comma in here that after my function, my callback function, I wrote the whole function in, the number of milliseconds. And I think by my testing, about 600 was about the right number of milliseconds for one revolution of that explosion. So let's run it. Hey, and we got a nice big pile of fire. Let's do that again. Yeah, that was fun. Let's see what happens. Beautiful. So I'm happy with my end game function. I've got a crashed into ground function. I think the only thing that's left for me to do is this hit by missile. So I need a function that will tell me if I've been hit by missile. What would be really nice is if I could just have something that would tell me, hey, is this one close enough to this one? But if you think about it, there's a point right about here in the center of my missile and a point right about here in the center of my helicopter, and if the distance between those 2 points just got close enough, the missile would explode and take out my helicopter, because that's kind of how missiles work. They don't actually have to hit you exactly. But my missiles X and Y are up here, and my helicopters X and Y are up here, and I don't have any function that just tells me the distance between 2 points. So I think what I'm actually going to do is first create a distance function. Now, a distance function, if you remember back to your math, it's really just Pythagorean theorem, but you just need an x1, a y1, and x2 and a y2. And if you give me the x1, y1 and x2, y2 of a point, I can calculate the distance between those points. And I won't bore you with the math right now, but we just need to return the distance between those points, which is the square root of. So we have to use our math library with the square root function. So it's the square root of, well, it's going to be x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. I don't have a quick, easy squared button. I'd love to use this little caret, but that doesn't work. But there is a math.power function, and we'll do, in that math.power function, we'll do x2 minus x1, then comma, because now we're going to do that to the second power, or squared. So we do x2 minus x1 squared plus math.pow of y2 minus y1 squared. That should do it. Sometimes it's good to kind of like test, does your function work? This is where you could throw in just a little console log, and we could test our function. Distance, if we had a point at 0, 0, and one at 3, 4, I use that one because I happen to know it should return 5, and indeed it does. The distance is 5. So my distance function works. Now I just need to use it in my hit by missile if, distance, we'll say distance between. Now, what's my x of my missile? If you think about it, the x of my missile is right here, so the center of the missile is whatever missile is plus 50. It's a 100 pixel wide picture, so 50 over is going to be the center of my missile. The y of my missile is, well, I'll just do that get y position, because I don't know what it will be, and that will be changing. Then I need my distance function. I've got the x, the y, I need another x, the x2, the x of my helicopter. I happen to know that my helicopter, I can go back to it here, is located at 115, and I know it's 70 by 70, so the middle of it is actually 115 plus 35, so that should be 150, if I'm not mistaken. If I didn't know that, I could do get exposition of heli plus 35. And then lastly, I need the y for my helicopter, and that is always that variable heli. So if the distance, there we go, that's a kind of a long convoluted thing there, but if the distance between that is less than, let's try 35 pixels, oops, not greater than, then return true, else we return false, just like our crashed into the ground function. And believe it or not, I already have that end game, so I think, oops, I crashed into the ground. I think we are done. If I get hit by a missile, the ground stops moving, we got our normal end game. You know, if you wanted to get creative, you could have the fire kind of like slowly fall to the ground or something. But this is as far as we got with day 2. I think we'll add part 3 later, where we have multiple missiles and multiple levels and maybe even a score. There are other things that you might want to add, like a start button, a welcome screen, maybe a you lose screen. I'm not sure. I'll leave those things up to you. But do join me next time where we can use an array to, one, to learn about arrays, but also to add multiple missiles. So have a good evening. Thanks.